Hi there. Last week I put out a question and it was, are you interested in how to sharpen a traditional saw like this one? And I got quite a good response from that, and there's a few out there that really do want to know how to do this. Whether it's because they own a saw, maybe a little one like that, that their father owned or their grandfather owned, or they're just curious as to what to do with it. So I thought that's what we'd do, but I just wanted to mention a couple of things first. Saw handles. If you look at this handle, look at the shape of it. It's got these little horns on here, and when you put your hand onto it, it holds your hand up and down like that. So your hand can't slip up and it can't slip down. 3 fingers are all that are required to go through the handle. Your index finger goes on the side of the handle and your thumb goes down the other side. That way, as I look at this, I can point it where I want it to go. I've got control left and right. I've got control up and down. It doesn't slip. And I've got control when I want to cut at an angle. If you look at a modern saw, because one or two of you said, oh, I just go out, when my saw's blunt, I just go out and buy another one. And I think they're talking about this type of saw with it's got a hardened point on the blade. The steel itself is just ordinary steel. It's just the fact that the teeth are hardened, so they'll last quite a long time. But the handles are absolute garbage compared to a traditional one, because there's no support in the handle. First of all, if you put 3 fingers through, your hand's sliding up and down the handle. If you put 4 fingers through, which is wrong, all right, I've got particularly small hands for a man, but you still don't feel like you've got control, and it wags about from side to side. You can put a finger on the side there, but there's no real support, and your finger tends to wander underneath and back into the grip again. And there's nowhere for your thumb to go on this side either, because it just rotates around. And I've got several on here that I just use for really rough work. But in terms of actually handle design, they are absolutely abysmal. And since they're making them out of plastic, why they can't mould that shape rather than this rubbish shape is a mystery to me. But maybe one of the tool manufacturers would like to come back and explain why they can't make that in plastic as opposed to that piece of junk. But the blades themselves, the blades are pretty good. It's just a very bad handle design. The only feature that is useful on these is the fact that on the back of the blade here and down here is 90 degrees on most of them. So if you're doing rough work on a building site, you can actually use it like a set square. That is a clever idea. But beyond that, no, they're not for me. Anyway, back to these traditional saws. This one isn't a particularly expensive one. It's got a steel back. It's not even got a fancy brass back on it. I don't know what make it is. I can't actually see a make on it anywhere, and it's not really relevant to sharpening. They're all more or less sharpened in the same manner. Apart from there's 2 different patterns that can be sharpening patterns. Let's call them sharpening patterns. One is to take the file and it goes straight across like that at 90 degrees to the blade. And then on a little saw like this where you're going to cross cut, the saw teeth are actually ground at 2 different angles like that and like that, which makes them more of a knife. I'm not going to deal with that one today. I'm going to deal with the more common cross cuts. I'm going to deal with the more common rip cut, as it's actually referred to. And if you think about each of these teeth as a little chisel, taking out a tiny bit of wood, scooping it out. I grab a little chisel and I add a piece of wood. Imagine that chisel, and it's just cutting a little bit out of there. But there's a whole row of them, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in very quick succession. That's exactly what those teeth are actually doing. Now then, sharpening. How do we deal with sharpening? There's two things to look out for. First of all, on this particular saw, is here there's a chipped tooth. It's not the end of the world, it won't stop it cutting, but you do have to watch out for any broken teeth. Now there is a fix for that, but you'd have to file them all down completely flat, so you got to whatever height that one is, and then recut every tooth. I'm not going to do that. That's way too much work and too advanced for this session. What I want to show you is how to fix this saw so it will cut beautifully without much effort, actually. And once you get used to sharpening the saw, you can sharpen the saw in about 5 minutes. Because the other thing people talk about is the set on the saw. If I look at it that way, point it right towards the lens, each of the teeth are set that way or that way, and it's done alternating. So you get, well, imagine if that's the saw blade and then the teeth are set off like that alternately, but they only have to be set off enough so that the actual steel plate of the saw doesn't bind in the cut. They don't need to be any more than that. They don't need to be widely splayed apart, just enough to clear the steel. So how to go about it? Well, the first thing is you do need a file. I've got one here somewhere. Now this is a Baco file. It's a saw file. This particular one is about, because somebody's going to ask me, it's about 5.5 millimeters wide, something like that. Round about just under 1/4 of an inch for our American friends. But what you want from the file is that when it goes into the steel plate, or when it goes into the teeth, that the teeth aren't more than halfway up the file. Now in this case, they're actually about 1/3 of the way up the file, and there's a reason for doing that. When you first look at a saw file, you think, oh, it's just a 3-sided file, but it isn't. It's actually 6-sided, because this pointy edge here is also a file. If you run your nail down that, you can hear it. And you need that because it cuts the gully of the teeth. So how do we go about actually doing the sharpening? I've made a little jig here, and it's literally just a scrap of timber. It's got a screw in one end, and there's a washer, just a thin washer in here to create a little gap. And that's all you need it to be, just a tiny little gap. And the shaping on this end is just purely so it fits this particular saw. I'm going to slide it in there, like that. And I want it to be about, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch or so. So that the teeth stick out like that. I'm going to bring the camera in for the rest of this. I'm going to put it into the vise like this. Okay, so all the teeth are sticking up. I mean, this saw isn't blunt, it's just been used. And there will be a bit of variation depending on what condition the saw is actually in. But I'm going to bring the camera really in close now so you can see what I'm actually doing and how I actually set this up. Okay, now the first thing is, as you look down on the saw, you'll notice that 1 or 2 of them are, well, more than 1 or 2, several are shiny and some are dull. And the thing about that is that some must be slightly higher than others. So the first thing I'm going to do, and the most important part of this, is making sure that all the tops of these teeth, if you think of them as mountains and valleys, you want the top of every mountain to be the same height. So I'm going to just take a simple flat file and just literally use my fingers to guide it and just do literally a couple of strokes all the way along. And then I'm going to take another look and see if there's a little shiny spot on the top of every single tooth. And there is, apart from the one that's missing just there. So we've got that part. Now all we've got to do is to start to file across, but, and this is the important bit, we want to start the filing, and the idea is that we want the cutting edge to be straight, but not at the very beginning. Because if you think about when you're using a saw, you start it off, you're just picking up the saw and you've got your piece of wood and you're just doing that on your piece of wood to start it until you've got a little groove, and then you cut. Well, in order to maintain the same angle all the time, what I suggest you do is you just take a little, I've got a little piece of dowel here with a hole in it. There you go. That's all it is. Just a straightforward bit of 1/4 inch dowel or 6mm, whatever it is. And I've just put it on the end of there. Now, normally a cutting face on the saw would be there. But on that first inch, and that's why I've got these little marks along here. I haven't actually lined it bang up with the inch marks, but it doesn't really matter. Because that's what I've done. I've set out inch marks all the way down there. And I've drawn lines across my little jig, so that I've got a reference to make sure I'm not going off to one side or the other side. I'm staying straight. Let's see if I can't just bring this camera a bit squarer. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set it like that, but I'm not going to, on my first one, it's not going to be absolutely vertical. I'm going to lean it back a little bit, and I'm going to just move my dowel so that is parallel with there. So rather than being, I want it to actually be the top surface to be nearer level. So it means that the cutting edge of the tooth is sloping backwards slightly. I'm just going to go 1, 2, move to the next one, 1, 2, 1, 2. And I'm going to go to each of them like that, keeping that parallel. I'm going to do that for the first inch. Right, at that point, I want this to be a slightly more of an angle. So I'm going to just tilt that over a little bit and move that so it's now parallel again. And do another inch. 1, 2. Now then, that's it. That's the end of my second inch. On the third inch, I want this to now be vertical. So I'm going to get that edge vertical by eye and alter the angle of my dowel so it's again parallel. And then I'm going to continue to file. 1, 2. And I'm going to go all the way along now. Just maintain the same number of strokes each time. And I'm holding the file in one hand and steadying it with the other hand. It's very important that you do that and maintain that you level front to back. Oops, lost my spot there. But a little piece of wood makes a hell of a difference to being able to maintain the angle. And I'm doing this in real time. I'm not speeding it up on video or doing any other sort of trickery on camera. It is taking this amount of time. I don't know what it is, but it's probably about 5 minutes at most. I'm going to move my stool along a little bit. It's easier if you sat down doing this, I will say that. Ooh, got a dodgy tooth there. And there we go. And when I put my fingers on that now, it feels a little bit like the claws of a kitten. That's sort of sharp and spiky. Now, before we take anything out of the clamp, I'm just going to look down at the tips of each of these and make sure that there aren't any flat spots on the top of any of the teeth. If there are, you can literally just put the foot. This one was a bit more like that. Just go along and just do an extra stroke if need be. But that's pretty much it. So this is now sharp. I don't know whether you timed me, but it didn't take very long. Now we come to the business of setting it. Now this saw doesn't actually need to be set, but this is a saw set. And inside it, in there, is a little anvil and what they refer to as a hammer. Can you see how that little plunger comes out of there? And there's a tiny little hammer that just strikes each individual tooth. I'm not going to reset this saw because it's not necessary. But that's what you would use. Now, let's grab a piece of wood. So let's say you were cutting a tenon, for example. So how's this saw doing? clearly nothing wrong with that saw. But even though it's a rip cut saw, it will cross cut. But it's very aggressive, and that's why you need the slightly less aggressive teeth at the beginning of the cut. There we go. So there's a very quick demonstration on sharpening your saw. Now, obviously, if the saw is very badly damaged, then you're going to need to do quite a bit more work, because the first thing you've got to do is get all the teeth level. This saw has actually got a tooth missing down there, and I thought it, and it's got a rather odd tooth there. I don't know what that's all about. Right on the heel of the plane, just there. But very rare that you use certainly not going to affect the saw's cutting. So I wouldn't do any more than that, and I will use that on a daily basis. I also like to give a shout out to Lardlins Thorson. I hope I haven't butchered your name, because he was interested in the rest that I use on my grindstone, because it's a homemade one. So I put a little video clip at the end of this saw sharpening session. So if you want to have a look at that, please do. I'm sure loads of you will have questions. It is quite a quick video, this. But hopefully, if you've got an old saw that you're not using, these files cost about £7 or £8. So not an awful lot of money. But once you've got one, I've had this saw for, I don't know, for saw file for absolutely ages, years probably. They last and last and last. And if you're in the habit of sharpening your saws regularly, although you don't need to sharpen them that often unless you're cutting joints all day long, is each time you use it, turn it round once and keep turning it round. You could perhaps put numbers on it, 1, 2, 3 or something like that, so that the wear is just even on the actual file itself. But you just need a file whose width is more than twice the depth of the saw that you're cutting. I mean, you could be sharpening a saw like that. It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same process. Now, the one we've just sharpened, the teeth are actually 12 to the inch. This little saw here is actually 14 to the inch. Gets a little bit harder to see, but it's perfectly doable. That one's a bit more complicated because not only is it a lot more teeth, but they're cut alternately on an angle and then back the other way, to get that cross cut. But if you're cutting small beads and dowels and picture frames, stuff like that, then to have a saw that is actually a dedicated crosscut saw is really handy, and it gives a lovely clean finish. Anyway, my name's Dave. I'm the Skint Woodworker. Thanks very much for joining me. I can't wait to hear your comments. I'm sure I will get loads of them, good and bad. But anyway, I will take it on the chin, and I'll assume that it's always constructive criticism. Until next time, take care now. Bye.